Hey everyone, if you want to make your own podcast but you don't know where to begin, Spotify for Podcasters makes it super easy. They've got everything in one place, it's totally free, and you can make money while doing it. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start doing it today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also supported, and you can even conduct polls and Q&As. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, the platform is totally free. No catch, totally free. When I wanted to start my own podcast, I did not know where to begin, and I didn't think it was even possible. And Spotify for Podcasters made it happen. They made it easy, they made it quick, and I am doing something that I love. What more can I ask for? So if you're interested in starting your own show, you can do it, and I highly recommend you give this a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. Hoping all is well with you out there today. I am extremely excited and honored to have a guest with us today, Jon Griggs. He was recently featured in an AKA testimonial video, former member of law enforcement for over 10 years, and he has a lot of insight when it comes to Kratom. So I am just honored and thoroughly excited to have you all listen to this conversation today, and I hope that you really enjoyed as much as I did. And without further ado, let's just hop on in. So here you are, my conversation with Jon Griggs. So here we are, sitting here with Jon Griggs. And Jon, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us and being willing to share a bit about your knowledge and your relationship with Kratom.
Sure, thanks for having me on, Jamie. I really appreciate it. Been listening to your show for about 4 or 5 months now, and you're doing a good job. I really enjoy it.
Well, thanks so much for that. That's great to hear and reassuring. And just for a little bit of a backdrop, maybe we can ask you to share a bit about yourself and where you're from, and what's your background.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Western Kentucky, and grew up here. Went to high school here. Started my career here in law enforcement. Started working in security when I was 18, and then became a police officer. A reserve police officer a week after I turned 21. And then a year later, I went to work at a maximum security prison and worked there for five years, and then relocated to St. Louis, Missouri, just because it was the closest large metropolitan area, just to gain some better work experience and move up the ladder, because that's quite a crazy place. And, somewhere like that will either make you or break you. So gave it a shot, and was pretty successful, and ended up being assigned as the kind of like the commander of a multi-institution gang task force. So that was really interesting. And I kind of went from there. We had a lot of problems there, and I went to the media with some of those issues. And, that's kind of where I was kind of really not exposed to big agencies that don't like a lot of information being shared with the public. I had a major issue with that. So, and it had to do with a lot of overdoses and deaths that were happening at the time. So I came back home and started an armed security agency, and we had an F4 tornado come through a town 20 minutes from here. And we were the first ones on the scene to secure a pharmacy that was being looted at the time. And from there on out, we've been doing some government some private contracting through a government agency out there in Mayfield, Kentucky, and that place was just torn up. That F4 tornado took the jail out. It took out the courthouse. It took out all the critical infrastructure in the town. I mean, it was insane. And the first thing that happened 30 minutes after the storm, we were there because a very good friend of mine is a deputy there, and he gave me a call to let me know that, hey man, this place is destroyed. Do you have any people available? Our jail got hit and we have to move 90 inmates. We got people in a candle factory that are buried in rubble. We got deputies that are having to go house to house to start locating missing people. Can you help? I was like, absolutely, I can help. What's happening? He said, well, we got a pharmacy being looted. I said, I'm on the way. So I put out a Facebook post and took a guy with me and some other people that work for me, and we went and secured the pharmacy. And it was absolutely insane. Like, people were actively looting that place a few minutes after this tornado came and destroyed it. Like, that was the first concern, was to go to the pharmacy and rob it. So I took the hard drives out of the computers for the pharmacy. They didn't have time to put anything in vaults. Like, this tornado came, I mean, it was just fast and furious, man. So they attempted to get this stuff put away, but there was not enough time. So I took the hard drives off the computers and held that pharmacy until the next day, until a different police department showed up. And it was a pretty crazy experience being out there and being pretty much alone and knowing that you're not going to have any backup at all. And you're not going to know how long that's going to go on like that. So I took the hard drives and turned them over to CVS and Walgreens so that people on prescriptions could go and get their medications filled, because, you know, there's people that pay in cash that are not on the insurance servers or data, you know, wherever they store the data. So those hard drives were extremely important for people to, you know, and stuff like lisinopril and insulin and metformin and stuff that's not even controlled, that is life sustaining, that those people were able to go and fill their medications and not have any issues.
Wow. Well, I think it's an understatement to say thank you for your service, but it has to be said. That is an incredible story. And I remember seeing those news reports on the television when that tornado hit, specifically the candle factory. I know got a lot of coverage. That's just incredible. So you kind of were in the right place at the right time, and that was an amazing foresight also, transferring those hard drives for the pharmacy. I have to wonder, how does your story intersect with Kratom? What's your first encounter with this?
Well, it's very interesting. First encounter with it was probably in around 2016, and I was in a pretty gnarly ATV accident. I like to hike, and there's places in Southern Illinois that are really, really kind of like, I wouldn't call it a plateau, but pretty ravine-y, and you can get some really good hiking in. So I was in a 4x4, and we wrecked that 4x4, and I had 6 broken bones in my face. I broke my nose. My septum was deviated. It was pretty bad, and we're in the middle of nowhere. So I had been kind of using Kratom for about 2 weeks before that incident. A buddy of mine had told me about it and said, this is extremely helpful for pain. You know, it might help your mood. And as soon as I tried it, I was like, wow, man, I don't feel depressed or in a fog or anything like that today. So as soon as that wreck happened, I got into my pack and I took 6 of the large Kratom capsules, which would probably be about 3 grams. And I'll tell you, this is insane. The pain-killing properties of this plant are extremely underestimated, because I took that and I was able to not go into shock. Now, I'm not giving you medical advice, but I'm just saying I didn't go into shock from that. I walked right into the emergency room and told the nurse, "Hey, I believe my nose is broken. It feels like a sponge." And I'm a baby. I have a very low threshold for pain unless it's kind of like any use of force or something like that, and adrenaline is just really pumping, because adrenaline offsets pain a lot. So I was shocked to get those x-rays back and find that I had 6 broken bones in my face. So at that point I was prescribed some pain medication and had to undergo some surgeries, but we got that all resolved. And it was kind of then that I realized, like, man, this is extremely effective for pain. And I had to use the pain medication, but when I came off of that, I had absolutely no problem. The kratom assisted with that. And I noticed that I've got post-traumatic stress. So I noticed that I was not experiencing a lot of symptoms from that when I would take kratom in the morning. So kind of discovered that there might be something to this. And then I kept using it. And I saw my counselor, and, she's like, "You're kind of a totally different person right now."
Wow. That's incredible. Do you remember what kind of kratom you were using at the time?
Yeah, it was, I believe it was called Gaia. It was in plastic jars. And at that time I wasn't buying it a lot. I was buying it just kind of sporadically. Oh, that, and the other company was called American Kratom, and it had like a bag and an American flag on it at that time. And Herbal Salvation, that was one as well.
Wow. So you're only using it for 2 weeks when this accident happens, and it's wow, that's amazing. It kind of took a leap there trying it out, and it really seems to have paid off. And you said that your counselor saw a change in you. Was it just what would you define that change as?
I was optimistic. I stopped fretting about the past and going back in my mind and replaying incidents. I stopped having kind of trauma-based obsessive thoughts. I was not avoiding people or things anymore. And she was blown away by the change in my behavior and attitude within a couple of months. So it was at that point that I cessated from pretty much all medications used to treat me for that.
Wow. And have you, given that you're so entrenched in the law enforcement community, have you met other people in law enforcement who use kratom or have experience with it? And also, do you have a sense of kind of how law enforcement views kratom, or is it a mixed bag, or is it
Sure.
not out there yet?
Yeah, Jamie, that's a good question. And I have several people that were former coworkers of mine that use kratom. In fact, it was a law enforcement officer that turned me onto it. So it's not exactly talked about because of the propaganda campaign that is being used against kratom, because law enforcement officers can't use marijuana. I mean, there's, quite a few reasons for that. But they have problems. I know a lot of guys that have been in this job for quite a while, and they, they suffer with things, and they're enforcing laws at this point that are pretty outdated. They know this. And some of the guys that I've talked to about this stuff, I know law enforcement that I've worked with previously that are on tactical response teams. I mean, these are serious guys with serious backgrounds, and they use it after working out. They use it in the mornings whenever they go on, to kind of use it for the same reason that I have, to use the mood boosting properties of that and kind of offset the depression that they have, because that it's not talked about, but when you're in law enforcement and, you feel this depression and you feel, if you've been exposed to any critical incidents and serious things, you experience this post-traumatic stress, and you're kind of looked down upon for getting that treated and trying to resolve the issues that you have. I'm not saying that that's every agency, but it's been a lot that I've been in with my experience.
Wow, it's a world that I don't think most of the public ever gets exposed to. So it's pretty amazing insight that we're getting here from you. So obviously it seems like Kratom has played a real role in your mental health, and I guess physical when it comes to pain, at least. Have you, over the time span that you've used Kratom, have you changed how you use it, or the types that you use and for the purpose?
Sure. In the beginning, I was just kind of not familiar with different colors or anything like that. And this is a pretty complex plant, so there's quite a bit to learn. And I started out using just kind of like a Mang Da. There wasn't a whole lot of information on Kratom back then in 2016. So I was buying it from a head shop. So there wasn't a whole lot of information with it. And now what I do is I use a green in the morning, and then I'll use a red later in the day, but an unfermented red, kind of like a mid-range speed on red. And I have learned so much about it. I own a subreddit with about 2,700 people, and the amount of information that comes and goes through that with people that are kind of subject matter experts in this field, vendors that have got this science down. I mean, as far as blending and strains and everything. But yeah, it's usually green in the morning, like a Malay, or I'm using green Indo today, mixed with a little bit of red Borneo, because I've kind of got a really good blend down. How about you? What do you like?
Well, I definitely, that's an interesting combo you've got there. I definitely am a creature of habit, and I've fallen into this, if it's going to be your average day, I might start off with either a green Thai or green Mang Da, and then later on in the day, I'll probably around like midday have something like white Indo or white Borneo. Once in a while, a white Mang Da, something like that. And that's kind of like my average day. Once in a while, I don't take Kratom every day, but I do take it often. And some days I won't need it in the morning, or maybe I'll just need it in the afternoon, or maybe neither. But when I get home in the evening, I want to relax, and I don't really like to drink alcohol or do anything else, and so I'll relax with a nice red type of Kratom, something like that, red Thai, for instance. So that's kind of like my average approach to any given day. Once in a while, I'll do some blending together. I think that I really like white and green Thai together. That's my favorite one.
That's an interesting combination there. It seems like you've gotten it down and you've pretty much found out what you like, and that's really good. I encourage people to do that if they find something that works, then to stick with it. And same thing with the hey little guy. Same thing with the alcohol. I've basically eliminated alcohol out of my life. I'll have a craft beer. I'll have 2 craft beers if my girlfriend and I go out to a nice restaurant, have a nice dinner, just because it goes with it well. And I like the taste of some of those craft beers, like IPAs and all that, but really about 2 times a month. And that is a drastic turnaround from where I was at back in from 2006 to 16 or 17 with alcohol, because I was consuming it regularly. Not like an alcoholic, but I'd have 3 beers maybe every other night. And I was kind of dependent on that for relaxation and, like you said, winding the day down.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to hear about all the different ways that people use Kratom. And one of the ways that I hear a lot of people use it is not because they have an issue with alcohol, but because they simply would like to drink less than they do, and that it just kind of makes them not that interested in having that drink. And that's certainly something I've found, at least, to be true for me personally.
Sure. Yeah. And if somebody can get off of alcohol, which is absolutely destructive to your body, it's destructive to people. I mean, this is in people that have an issue with alcohol and are heavy drinkers. It's destructive to your family, and it can be a really bad thing in certain people's lives. And if they can use something to mitigate that use and to get off of that, that's amazing.
Yeah, totally. I'd be fascinated to ask you about, given that you have this experience in law enforcement, you seem to have some sort of ideas to, your own view of like what outlawing Kratom might mean for the law enforcement industry and for corrections. I think you mentioned that in a message to me, so I'd love to hear about that. What do you think the impact would be with that?
Well, this might be a kind of a long, drawn-out answer, but it's going to be extremely detailed. I have a employee of mine, and he was involved, kind of the same background as me. He started in corrections, and we worked at a pretty active place that there was a lot of things going on at that time. And when we both started out, so he has developed extreme lower back pain. And this also comes from wearing a heavy vest all day and sitting with a heavy vest on, and wearing a gun belt with just a whole bunch of equipment on it. One or sometimes two pairs of handcuffs, a firearm, 2 or 3 magazines, pepper spray, a baton, a radio. That adds up. And when it's on your body all day long, it stresses it. And you kind of start, I actually was reading about this not too long ago, that 63% of law enforcement experience lower back pain, and 9% of those that experience it have to end up having surgeries, and they have a whole range of issues. I even know a guy who has linked this to carpal tunnel, and that was he was a range instructor, and it's believed that that is how he developed carpal tunnel syndrome. But the employee of mine, he is in extreme pain all the time. He's probably only 5 or 6 years older than I am, so I kind of fear the future on that. And it's believed in the law enforcement community that a lot of these laws are outdated. Now, there are agencies that will, especially in draconian areas, that will enforce things like marijuana, that will still take you to jail. Now, in Kentucky, it's not decriminalized, but it is looked at different, and fines are handed out. $45 fines for a first offense, and then they kind of go from there. And these guys don't like to enforce that, because marijuana is legal 20 minutes from me across the river in Illinois. It's legal in a few different states that are pretty close. I've been to Oregon, I've been to California, I've been to Washington State. I've been to some of these dispensaries in places that marijuana is completely legal. And some of these cops, whether they admit it or not, they have too. So they do not like to enforce laws like that, because it also builds friction. It builds friction with the community. People who are marijuana users are, for the most part, not violent like people on alcohol. Excuse me. They're not abusive. Domestic situations, a lot of those instances arise from people using drugs and alcohol. And marijuana is a soft drug. So law enforcement has learned over the last 20 years that as this progresses, our laws are outdated, and enforcing this creates a huge friction with the community. That is the same as Kratom. Okay, this part-time employee of mine has told me multiple times, like, man, if this gets outlawed, how do I enforce something like that I use regularly? So it becomes, at that point, a moral dilemma. And there are a whole lot more cops on this than people realize, for the reasons, I caveated there with your body pain and kind of some of the emotional things that they have gotten at. I went so far as to find a corrections impact statement. Kentucky, back in our last legislative session, our legislative session runs from it's totally different than Missouri and St. Louis. They're in session all year, which, those are massive metropolitan areas, and we only have 2 of those here. But they're in session for 4 months. So they'll start committees in January and they'll end sessions in April, which is kind of a good gig if you're an elected politician, because you get the rest of the year off after that. Paid. So they like to hang on to those seats. I can see why, but they introduced legislation January of 2022 this year to outlaw kratom in this state and make it a Schedule I drug. Well, there's a few issues with that. Number one, Schedule I's are supposed to not carry any type of medicinal benefit at all. Well, that was challenged by NIDA, by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which is part of the National Institute of Health. So I found out about this, about them banning it. And I did a testimonial for the American Kratom Association not too long ago, but this was before that. So I found out about this, and I started putting guys together that I knew that, had some fortitude and would say, that this has no business being placed as Schedule I or banning for multiple reasons. So I gathered 4 guys up, and I called the 2 representatives that were introducing this legislation and found out when this was going to be heard on the House floor. And we were going to go and speak for 5 minutes each person about how outlawing this would be extremely detrimental. It would be destructive, and it would cause a whole lot of issues with law enforcement and enforcing kratom. So one of those things that I ran across in the research was the correction impact statement. They're going to have to give people jail time for this if they make it a Schedule I. Incarceration. We have this COVID going on and has been plaguing us for 2.5 years, and it's been the practice of correctional institutions to release for, early release because of COVID. So you want to release people early, some of those that are violent, for violent felonies, okay, and get those people out of prison early. And then you want to put people in prison for kratom? I mean, it is it makes
such an interesting backdrop.
It makes 0 sense. And I looked into this. So it would cost $10 million a year and they looked into this. This is how I got a hold of it from the from the representatives. They released it to the Health and Human Services Committee. It would cost $10 million a year to incarcerate Kentuckians for being in possession of kratom. And that would stress law enforcement, because law enforcement has to go and enforce this. So you're going to, if you're a police officer or a probation parole officer and you have to revoke somebody for using kratom, they're not going to be happy about that. And I don't blame them. So now you've created a violent situation. Whereas before, no situation existed. Now you're going to have violent resistance, which is extremely dangerous for that person and the officer. And then you have another thing that these people, that I hammered them each time I called them on. You have people who are in active recovery and that are using this substance. When you take it away, what do you think is going to happen?
Right.
So the bill,
it's just amazing.
It is. So, and that was a main concern of mine. You know, I've kind of looked at the numbers throughout the country, and there's 15 million people that are members of the American Kratom Association. 15 million. And I would say, take a stab in the dark, that there's probably 5 million more that aren't registered with them. So probably 20 million people across the nation. It could be even more than that. You could be at 25 or 30. I'm not sure. But are you willing to roll the dice and to take a chance and have someone turn back to dangerous and addicting narcotics and heroin? In Kentucky, I will tell you something that is shocking. In Kentucky, when the opioid crisis, I say that in air quotes, with the opioid crisis, in my belief, it was manufactured. You had pain management clinics. There were people that were they were putting old people onto buses, and they were busing them up here, and these doctors were writing them Oxycontin prescriptions, oxycodone, roxycodone, all kind of just the absolute worst painkillers that you can get your hands on. Like, it was no problem. And these people didn't have to be residents of this state. They didn't have to really prove a whole lot. And you're giving them the most serious narcotics that are available to mankind. And then 10 years later, you want to turn around and ban something that is relatively harmless compared to those. It's mind-blowing to me, and it's shocking. So Kentucky's an economically depressed state. There are a few areas that do have decent economies, that do have programs for residents and things, but for the most part, it's not. You know, you have manufacturing that left. You have coal. You have coal that was a major industry here that is basically gone. So when that happens, it affects families. It affects children of the parents who lost their jobs, and it creates so many problems. So that is another reason why the opioid incident had been fueled, especially in economically depressed areas. If you look at where it was the worst, you'll see that it was those same types of places. So I go into the community, into the public every single day, and I see these people. You know, I see them, and it's a bad situation for everybody, because I know that there are people that did not go in to that type of thing thinking that they would be chained to this for so long. And it's kind of disheartening to know that these doctors, they knew this all along. So yeah, I brought that up a lot when talking to these representatives, and the bill was actually killed. Now, I'm not going to say that we had any influence doing that. I know the AKA had a whole lot, but they did not want four former police officers, one current, to go out there on that House floor and put this out.
Wow. I mean, you brought up so many incredible points there and things I did not know about. I mean, the fact that there's actually an official impact statement that was done that shows $10 million per year cost to incarcerate people in Kentucky for kratom use. I mean, that in and of itself is such a specific and it's just such a specific issue that I don't think anybody would want raised publicly. But I mean, the cost to the public in and of itself, another reason not to ban the substance. But that's insane. And also, yeah, the backdrop you bring of the movement to release people from prison during the height of the COVID pandemic. I know that we saw a lot of that up here in my neighbor Vermont over here, with the goal of releasing half of all prisoners. Basically, that it's incredible to think that at the same time kratom is illegal, or you know, in your case, the push to make it illegal and what that would mean. So insane to think about that as well.
Yeah, it undoes everything. It just rolls the clock back, and you're putting nonviolent people in a place that's meant for violent offenders.
Right. And why? So with all of that being said, so why do you think people and legislators keep trying to ban this?
I have a good theory on that, and I've kind of got a team together, and we're looking into it. I believe, campaign contributions are public. They have to be public. Campaign finance reform made all that available for us, and violation of campaign finance is prison time. Excuse me. I was drinking some ginger ale. They take that pretty serious, and rightfully so. So it is my belief that treatment facilities, be it methadone, Suboxone, or that shot that they administer to people, treatment facilities are losing many patients and a lot of money with this kratom that's available. So we've been digging around, and we encourage anyone who has the time to research, who feels strongly about this, to seek out the representatives that are bringing up these bans, be it local politicians, state reps, United States congressmen, and look at their campaign contributions and see if they accepted any money from a Suboxone treatment facility, because that would motivate them to put this legislation on the table.
Wow, that is such a good point, and I'm specifically thinking of the recent push to make kratom illegal in Ascension Parish, Louisiana, which they did succeed in that, and they had 2 days of testimonies, or 3 days, and everybody minus 2 people, and I did count, and it was everybody minus 2 people who testified against kratom all worked for or had a relationship to the Lifehouse Wellness Clinic in Ascension Parish. So that's just fascinating. That's fascinating. Oh my God. It's such an obvious thing, you know, like it's such an obvious connection to make, but until someone says it out loud, I don't know.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought of it myself, honestly. Wow.
Right. And the thing with that is I know a guy who reached out to me through that Reddit group, and you know, he said, "Hey man, I'm in the parish down here. You know, we call them counties, the next county over, and they're going to lobby to make this illegal here." And someone who's close to me is related to an owner of one of these facilities, and they're pushing it forward. So I know that is happening. And like you just said, Jamie, the people that testified against this were directly involved with these treatment facilities. So if we are going to keep this legal, that has got to be highlighted. That has got to be highlighted. You know, the Suboxone does good things for people. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and say that someone who's hopelessly addicted to serious narcotics, that it doesn't benefit. Sure. Okay. There are people that it will. However, you have this, that you do not withdraw nearly as bad as you would from something like that Suboxone. So you're taking something and you're giving it to people, again, knowingly that they're going to be chained to this and they're going to have to cycle down and do all these things. But what if something happens when they're cycling down? What if something that's out of their control goes on and they're cut off from this medication? Well, do we expect those people to hopelessly suffer? No, we don't. What's acceptable is for those people to, if they're open to it, to use kratom to help them with that. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, just from the personal side of things, my brother certainly experienced this a million times over. As he battled addiction for 10 years, he would go through these programs and be given Suboxone or methadone or that shot, like you mentioned. And then, you know, he'd miss the bus one day because he was placed in a halfway house in a city that he's not, you know, he's not familiar with, but he misses his bus and he doesn't make it to his appointment. And as a result of that, he doesn't, you know, he's not given his dose of Suboxone that whole week. And so then he starts withdrawing, and what ends up happening is he's either going to go and try and get Suboxone illegally off the street, which he did try and do, and if he can't do that, then he ends up falling back in the addiction. And I saw that happen so many times I can't even count. So all that in saying, I think your point's very valid. With all this being taken into account, what do you think the future of Kratom looks like, and what would you like to see? It kind of bounces off your point of having Kratom be an accepted part of this withdrawal and recovery aspect. But what do you think the future looks like, and what would you like to see?
Well, I think the future looks pretty turbulent, and I don't say that lightly. What I'd like to see is people become more educated on it and to learn more, because there are negatives with this. Sure, there are negatives, but it's my belief that the positives completely outweigh the negatives. I'd like to see more research done into the medical aspect of this, which is going on. I know somebody who works for NIDA, and they are involved with this research and doing some amazing, groundbreaking work. And, I've told them, look, you are a subject matter expert. I want to see your opinion when it's done with this research, be it positive, negative, all aspects of it. I want to see all of that. I'd love to see that in public view, because I believe that it's going to show that this is not harmful and it is beneficial, but there are a few, negative side effects to it. And that's common with anything. That can be common with aspirin and ibuprofen and, anything that you're putting into your body. Coffee, people can overdose on coffee. I'd like to see that moving forward. I'd like to see kind of media, pick this up and make it well known, because there are people that, like my parents, like mom and dad, didn't know what this was. They didn't have a clue. There's a lot of boomers that have no idea what this is. And I'll tell you, there are people that I know that are older, that are in their mid 60s, kind of pushing 70, that have worked a lifetime in heavy industry, and their bodies are not in great shape, and they're in a lot of serious pain. And if they had this as an alternative, I believe that they would choose this. So instead of surgeries that, I know people that have had surgeries that made them worse after the surgery, and that's what I'm worried about going into the future. I would also like to see people to become more involved and to spread the positive aspects of Kratom. Nothing at all should be mixed with a controlled substance, ever. And, that can be a dark shadow in this community, people saying that they do that. I don't want to see any more of that at all. And I have two rules. Basically, I love freedom. I'm an original intent guy with the Constitution of this country. I do not tolerate any type of illicit drug conversation whatsoever. I do not tolerate people talking about mixing Kratom with controlled substances. You're doing something really dangerous. And if someone's in my groups, then they're banned. There's no discussion. It's immediately done. I want to see people focus on positive. And I want to see just a basic understanding from the general public, because we're in a propaganda war. This country operates off propaganda, and it's extremely dangerous. Look what happened, not to get all political, but look what happened in Iraq. Okay, that was pure knowing propaganda, and the government has no problem lying to us and deceiving us. They have programs that were implemented and made by intelligence agencies with major media to promote we're the most heavily propagandized people in the world, and it's because we have a free spirit and we think for ourselves. But when you put ideas in people's head and you constantly bombard them with misinformation, half stories, half truths, and false narratives, people believe it because they don't have the time to seek that information out on their own and to self-debunk it, or, they don't care and they see that they go with the first thing that they hear about. I see it a lot. People are saying, well, kratom is just as addicting as morphine. Well, you know what? I've got a paper from NIDA that completely, from an expert, a subject matter expert in this field, who gets paid to do this and who has an unbiased opinion that says, no, it's not. It has a low threshold for abuse. It has low abuse potential. And I see that all the time, and it's false. And I want those type of things to be stopped. I want fair reporting on this. I don't want biased agencies getting paid to promote something that's not true. And I'm active with the AKA. I did a video testimonial with them, which was a great experience. It was really well produced, and those people were really great to me. I would like to see more people get involved and advocate for this. And also, what I see coming in the future is you're going to have to get on board with self-regulation. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's something that is going to have to happen. And vendors should start moving into that themselves now. Testing their products. I just dealt with something with somebody, I'm not going to get into it a whole lot, but there was worries about adulteration. So I sent this person a test kit. Self-regulation should be, if you're a vendor, your number one priority right now. Because if you do not self-regulate, we're going to have the government that are going to step in and they're going to ban it. If they don't ban it, they're going to force regulation on you anyways. Are you prepared for that? Are you offsetting the cost for all of those things? I hope so, and you better be. I believe that people can there's a lot of people in the are you familiar with the small batch community?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Small batch is where you have vendors that order direct from Indonesia, and it's smaller batches. It's maybe 50 kilos of kratom at a time of a certain strain. And there's a lot of vendors a lot of these strains are blends. They don't call them blends, but that's what they are. They blend them on their own. So small batch is, and it's a lot better than any of these super big national companies. It's better quality, it's better taste, it's better effects. You don't have to consume nearly as much. It's better for everybody because this stuff isn't sitting in connexes and shipyards being hot for 6 months at a time, for 3 or 4 months and degrading the alkaloids in that plant. So it's fresh, it gets here, and after they get their lab results, they start selling them. So that's kind of just a real brief description of what small batch is. And small batch opposes these regulation pushes. And I get it. You're a small business, you're a smaller vendor, and I support you. I love you. But you need to make plans for the future. You really need to get ready to do that. And there's a lot of opposition in the small batch community to the American Kratom Association and kind of the Safe Kratom Acts that they're pushing, which look, this is going to keep this legal for everybody. All right? Make the appropriate changes that you need, the guidelines that they have brought up. So be it you're a member or not, okay, that's irrelevant. Take their model and start using it, because eventually you are going to be forced to do it anyways, or if you're not forced to, you're done. So I really don't understand the opposition there. And I think it's kind of cognitive dissonance. It's people that don't want to accept what the future is moving forward, because this is a totally different world than it was 3 years ago. The FDA and the DEA instituted an emergency ban on kratom for salmonella. 17 people were poisoned with salmonella. And this is very common with lettuce. You know, we see lettuce and leafy vegetables that have salmonella warnings and recalls all the time. So 17 people being affected by kratom in the long run is not that serious of a deal. However, the FDA was very close to instituting a emergency ban on this. And if they went emergency, they would hold that emergency off. They would extend it and prolong it until they instituted, and because that was the plan, until they instituted a outright full-on ban. So I worry about that. If you take the steps and you test your batches and you make that public, you know, there's a lot of kratom vendors that use white labeling services. It's large vendors who order the kratom and they brand it for you. Okay, I get it. Nothing wrong with that. Make sure the labs are out there. Make sure the labs are transparent. People can read them. Make sure that the salmonella tests negative. Make sure that it's okay for your consumers. Basically, if you would put it in your body, you better make sure that people that you're selling it to are going to be able to safely put it in theirs. So I worry about that because, I mean, this is hanging on by a thread right now. And if someone's adulterating or they poison people or anything like that, kiss this goodbye. It is gone.
Wow. I have to say you have an extremely valuable and grounded view on this issue and on kratom in general. I've always thought that it was fascinating that, you know, it's seemingly, at least, the most vocalized majority of people who are in favor of kratom tend to be pushing for some sort of Kratom Consumer Protection Act framework, and it's always been interesting for me to see that the proponents of kratom are for regulation of that product, which they want to continue to access, but it's for that very reason that they want to continue to be able to access it, and it seems to be that safe regulation is the way forward. So this whole small batch thing is really interesting to me. It's definitely something I didn't know about before, and kind of the reason why I started this show is just so that I could learn more about this, because it seemed more complex than what met the eye, and it certainly has been that way. So God, I wish I had another hour to talk to you right now.
Sure.
I hope that I can get you to come back again, Jon, and thank you so much for taking the time.
I was if you don't mind, you know, I've got some coupon codes for some of your listeners if you don't care about putting those out.
No, go for it. Sure. Thanks for coming on. Shoot, go for it.
Sure. There's a company really great, Delta Extracts, and a code JG25 will get you 25% off your first order with them. The guy is a great guy, freedom-loving American, really good products. Northeast Botanicals, they're another good one. Bewitched Botanical, I'm kind of helping her move into this self-regulation and that type of thing. She's another good one. We got Philly. We got a whole lot of people that are small businesses that, you know, they want to help you source and find some fresh products and fresh things that are safe for you to consume. So, you know, I highly encourage people to look more into that as well and support these people so that they can become AKA members and that they can self-regulate and keep this alive for everyone, because you got a whole lot of vendors out there, a whole lot, and I love them all. But yeah, we really need to move forward, and we need to do it before it's forced. So I appreciate you, man. I really appreciate the conversation and talking with you. You're a well-rounded guy, and you got a great head on your shoulders and a bright future. And I appreciate you giving people the opportunity to, you know, voice their opinions and their knowledge on this thing moving forward, because it's people's voices that we want to hear, not paid activists.
Right. Well, I'm glad. I appreciate your recognition of that, and that's that is definitely part of the goal here. As everyone knows who listens, this is not like a paid program through anyone. It's simply to have a Kratom community, to have a daily check-in, and to see what the heck is going on out there and what the heck people think about it. That would be the sum up. So go check out those sites and check out those coupons that Jon just mentioned through his friends there. And thanks so much for coming on, Jon. We have to do this again.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime, Jamie. You just hit me up and we'll make time. And it's good talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, you as well. All right. And take care.
See you, buddy.
Bye.